Welcome. Today is Thursday of the second week of Advent. The two candles are lit, and we're reading Tabitha's Travels by Arnold de Trede. Today's chapter is titled Jericho. Tabitha froze in place, too scared to even breathe. Decca stared straight at her from 20 paces away. In her planning, she had thought the night to be dark enough that she could hide, especially since the 5 thieves had been staring into the fire. Everyone knows, she had thought, that you can't see well in the dark if you've been looking at the light. But now Tabitha knew she was wrong. Decca could see, and he was seeing her right now. A moment later, Decca motioned with his arm and yelled to his men, "Follow me!" Some part of Tabitha knew that she should run, but her legs would not obey. She stood frozen in place, eyes wide, staring at Decca charging right at her. Decca's men fanned out on either side, surrounding Tabitha like a fish in a net. But then a strange thing happened. Decca went right past Tabitha, a few paces to her left. She waited for a blow from behind, but the men all just kept running. Finally, Tabitha turned slowly, just in time to see all 5 of the thieves chasing their horses into the night. My plan worked, she realized suddenly. Breaking her feet loose from the grip of fear, she ran toward the campfire, scooped up her blanket without even stopping, and dashed off into the night. Angling up toward the roadway, Tabitha ran faster than she ever had run before, faster even than her brothers chasing a rabbit. Around a bend in the road, and then another, she ran until her lungs were filled with fire and her throat felt like the sand under her feet. When the last stride finally left her legs and there was no more to be found, she collapsed by the side of the road, heaving in great gasps of air like a horse after a race. Slowly, Tabitha's breathing eased, and her shaking calmed. She listened carefully for any sound of hoof or foot searching for her, but she heard none. Confident that she would not be found, she lay down behind a juniper bush, wrapped the soft blanket around her, and fell asleep for the first time in 2 days. Tabitha was shocked to see her caravan approaching. Led by her uncle Ananias, with her mother just behind him, the long stream of camels, donkeys, sheep, and people was lumbering up the road from En-Gedi, and there, right in the middle of it, was her father. "Father, father!" Tabitha cried, and ran toward him. Her father smiled and waved, and Tabitha felt as if the whole world had started moving again after a long pause. But no matter how fast Tabitha ran, she couldn't catch up with her family. She ran and ran and ran, but they kept getting further away. Soon the last of the sheep had passed by on the road, and still she could not catch them. A moment later they were gone, around the next bend in the road. "Stop!" she called after them. "Wait!" But they neither stopped nor waited. Once again, Tabitha was all alone in the desert. And that's when she woke up. Flies swarmed around Tabitha's head, and she brushed them away. The sun was high in the sky, and she was sweating under the warm blanket. She blinked several times to wake up. The caravan, her family, it was only a dream. This realization made her very sad, sadder than she'd ever been in her entire life. "It's like I'm on one side of Palestine," she thought, "and my whole family is clear on the other side." A moment later, she realized that was exactly the case, and that thought made the pain in her heart even worse. "I lift up my eyes to the hills." That verse from the Psalms that she had used to comfort her father now came to comfort her. "Fear not," the words in her head continued, "for I am with you." As if she had been wrapped in another blanket, a blanket of love, Tabitha felt like Jehovah truly was with her, sitting beside her in the desert, ready to comfort and protect her. And he already has, Tabitha said out loud as she thought about her raid on Decca's camp the night before, remembering how she had sneaked up between the horses and freed them, how she had captured the serpent and used it to frighten the beasts, how Decca had seemed to run right at her, but couldn't see her because she stood perfectly still. Tabitha's mouth dropped open, and she stared out toward the sea. I did all that, she whispered to the wind, and then she realized it was not in her own strength that she had done these things. Jehovah, you truly are with me, she said after a moment, and now I know you will take care of me no matter what. With that, Tabitha stood, folded her blanket, and set out up the road toward Jericho. Along the way, she found a fig tree that had not been picked clean by other travelers. How strange, she thought, as she filled her belly with the fruit, that the many people who pass by this tree have ignored these few figs, and just enough for my breakfast. The sun was straight overhead now, and Tabitha continued her walk. As the sun traveled across the sky, Tabitha traveled along the road. She was passed by only 2 other bands of wanderers, and both times she hid until they were far down the road. At about the time her stomach was telling her it was ready for dinner, Tabitha came round a bend and saw the most wondrous sight she had seen in days. There before her, surrounded by green palm trees and a rainbow of fruit, sat the glowing city of Jericho. I made it, Tabitha wanted to cheer, but I must not look like a lost little girl. I must look like I belong here. Tabitha shook her head and wondered where that thought had come from, but she saw the wisdom in it and looked around for something to help her. There, lying alongside the road, as if it had been placed there just for her, was a small urn. She picked up the vessel, wondering why someone would leave a perfectly good pot by the side of the road. Then she saw a tiny crack in it, and knew it had been thrown away. Satisfied that she was not stealing something somebody had simply lost, Tabitha tied her blanket around her waist, held the urn in her arms, and walked into Jericho as if she knew exactly what she was doing and where she was going. The problem was that neither of those was true. She wanted to stop and gawk at all the sellers from foreign lands and the makers of jewelry and perfumes and clothing, but she dare not look interested lest someone recognize that she was all alone, without a parent in close attendance. Such knowledge would give a kidnapper great courage, she knew that. Pushing her way down the crowded main street, Tabitha tried to look for the landmarks Bartholomew had drawn for her in the sand. She was getting excited now, knowing that within a few minutes she'd be celebrating with Jotham and his new friends Nathan and Silas. As she passed through the delightful smells from the cellar of cheese, she imagined how good it would feel to hug her friend and see a familiar face. Bartholomew had assured her that Nathan and Silas would do everything necessary to help her find her father and prove his Roman citizenship. All these imaginings made Tabitha so happy that she walked even faster, anxious now to get to her destination. A potter! Bartholomew had said to turn right at the first potter's shops he saw, and there it was. The side street was not nearly as crowded, and Tabitha passed children playing and women humming songs as they hung clothes to dry. It was indeed a happy place, a safe place. Looking for 2 palm trees by a well, Bartholomew had told her, and turn left. The house of Silas is the first house on the corner on the right. 2 palm trees, Tabitha cried to herself when she saw them. She was getting so close now that she didn't care if she looked lost or not. She ran ahead, dragging the little urn by the rim. Then she saw the well at the base of the trees and knew that the house of Silas was just around the corner. Past women drawing water she ran, through a group of children playing camel races. With the sound of her clapping sandals echoing off the walls of the buildings, she ran the last few lengths down to the corner of the next street on the left. And there she stopped and stared, stunned. The house of Silas stood open and empty. Inside she could see that thieves had ransacked the house and left little behind but broken pottery and piles of trash. A moment later, snakes ran up her spine as a bony hand gripped her shoulder, and Tabitha heard a man's hissing voice whisper in her ear, "Are you lost, little girl?" Reversal of fortune is a phrase writers use to describe that moment their hero goes from being safe and secure to being in utter peril. Sometimes our fortunes are reversed in real life as well. Everything seems to be going along fine, and then wham, a tragedy hits, and it seems as if life itself will never be the same again. The question isn't whether or not those reversals will happen in our lives. The question is, what will we do when they happen? I will lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Tabitha comforted her father with these words early in her adventure. She uses them now to comfort herself. As Christmas approaches, perhaps they are good words for us to learn and memorize and believe to prepare us for the reversals of fortune that might lie ahead.